Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular council meeting of Monday, the July 13th. I wish to acknowledge that we are meeting tonight on the territory of the Sauk Nation. And as we begin, I do have a few announcements to share. So as you may have read or seen in the newspaper or online or the radio, there's been several announcements made. One of them was the federal announcement that we were successful in our grant application of just under $900,000 to build a multi-sport court box on Sun River lands. And that was through the Infrastructure Canada investing in community funds, which is a federal stream. So that's really exciting news for us. Today, the province announced their construction will commence. They've awarded the bid to what looked like a local provider to do the Otter Point work outside of our boundary, but also the improvements to sidewalks within our town centre heading westward from Otter Point Road. Of that, SEAPARC has made a contribution of $200,000, and I don't have the announcement in front of me, but there's significant federal or provincial dollars to match that, so that's exciting news for us today. About $1 million, is that correct? I think you're right.
It's a good chunk of change.
Yes, so we'll get clarity on that one shortly.
I'm surprised Jeff doesn't have it on his fingertips.
I know. Also, the BC Housing has announced the renovations that they're doing in the Hope Centre, so that's renovating the second floor into 8 attainable rental units, so that's exciting. I also wish to give a thank you to our first responders, Councillor Lajeunesse, who drove with me through on Canada Day, our sort of parade, or it was a motorcade throughout our community as a way just to celebrate the holiday. So thank you very much for that. Our CAO is on vacation at the moment, well-deserved, so I'd like to thank Ms. Gray for rising to the occasion in the position of our acting CAO, so thank you so much. And to all of our staff for doing such a tremendous job within our municipality, and council colleagues for their governance work as well. So that's sort of it for now. We'll look to see what other updates we have, get clarification on the provincial monies that are being invested in our road work, but that's all very exciting. So that brings us straight on to item 3, which is Ministerial Order M192, and the resolution that we need to pass at every meeting is that Council is holding this meeting without members of the public in attendance in accordance with Ministerial Order M192, as Council Chambers does not have the capacity to safely accommodate the unknown number of public participants wishing to attend, and that Council remains committed to Council is committed to ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability through the submission of written comments and the provision of live and recorded broadcasts of the meeting. So looking for a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Beto, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. In our last meeting, we discussed just some of the work that staff is doing that'll come back to us in report form in regards to this resolution. So any other questions? None? I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We have today's item 4, tonight's approval of the agenda. So that's for the July 13th regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Questions, comments, anything? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Meeting minutes here from June 23rd, Committee of the Whole. Recommendation is that minutes be adopted as circulated by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Questions, comments, corrections? None. Whoa. Wow.
Whoa, yay.
One small typo, but just one.
One small typo.
Just one.
What is it, Councillor
It was
Bateman?
just an of, I think was missing. But I didn't even note.
It wasn't even noted, but we'll follow through as needed. Yes. Okay, all in favor of adoption? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Report of the Chief Administrative Officer. Ms. Gray, please.
Okay, thank you. Through your worship, so just a small update, and since Mr. McInnes isn't here, I'll talk about some finance stuff first. So as you know, property tax season is kind of still slightly in progress, but a big chunk of it ended on July 2nd there with our initial due date for the Class 1 and 2 and 9 properties. So I'm pleased to report that basically we're pretty much at the same position we were last year, currently at 86% of the property taxes collected, which is great news for the district and will kind of set us up with some much needed funds to deliver on a lot of these capital projects we were trying to hopefully deliver on in 2020 here. So that's great news, and there still is the extended penalty date for the commercial class businesses, which give them until September 30th to pay without a penalty. So looking at the list, there's definitely a few organizations that will be, I'm fairly confident will pay us, and so we should be at pretty much in the high 90s for our collection rate, similar to prior years. So that's really good news for the district. And thank you to the residents of Souk for prioritizing and ensuring their property taxes were paid. And another good news as well to come from that is we really promoted the filing of your homeowner's grant and the paying your property taxes online. And there's definitely been a significant increase in that, especially with the homeowner's grant. A lot of people would pay online but still file their homeowner's grant or come in person to drop off their homeowner's grant. So it's nice to see the trend switch on that and more people are feeling comfortable with filing those online. So that's great. We normally were at like 43% of online filing, and we're almost, I think, at 60%. We almost finished with filing online this year. So that was good. As Mayor Tate mentioned, we were finally got word that we received the grant that we applied for the multi-sport court box. So kickoff meeting will be occurring later this week. And as council needs to be apprised of more information, we will advise you either through a report to council if required. But anticipate we can do a lot of this work behind the scenes now that we've got the official go-ahead. So expect to see some tenders and stuff being posted for the work. Speaking of tenders, the wastewater treatment plant centrifuge upgrade, the final piece of it, we've already purchased the equipment in prior years, and now the final piece of it is to actually tender to have a qualified contractor install it. So that tender is being posted or is currently posted right now. So that'll be good. That'll be a nice addition to replace the centrifuge at our wastewater treatment plant, which is much needed. As Mayor Tate stated, there thankfully was a quick resolution to the homeless situation at McGregor Park. OCP work is underway. The committee applications are coming in, so those will be reviewed as they're coming in. Council expect to see a report coming again with Otter Point Road. It's nice, it's getting lots of attention from the province and from ourselves as well. So there's a tender that was posted for the Otter Point sidewalk design from the highway to Wadham's Way. So this is to get the design work completed so that it could be shovel ready in anticipation of potential grants and such being available later on. And so you have a higher chance of being awarded a grant if your project's shovel ready. So that's design work, and so expect to see a report to council possibly on July 27th, I believe, just to award the tender to the successful submitter. There was an open house for the Parks and Trails and Transportation Master Plan last week. So that's kind of one of the final pieces that we need to do before we can bring it back and have council adopt both those plans. Or accept both those plans. And the new Director of Operations is starting on Monday, so that's really exciting. And that's about it.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes.
That's good. I answered. Through the chair, the sports box plan, I assume when we asked for the grant that we actually had to file some sort of a plan? Do we have something, you know, on how it looks and all that sort of stuff?
Through your worship, yeah, we had a preliminary, because this has been thought about for years now. So
okay.
there was a preliminary design.
Was submitted with the...
What was kind of submitted, and so that's the purpose of the kickoff meeting later this week, is to kind of finalize this, it's basically a multi-sport box.
Is there any chance that I could get a copy of that plan, or will that throw your planning into... me nosing around? I just would like to see it because I had someone stop me on the street and they were worried about the parking. And unfortunately, I hadn't seen the plan, so I would like to just get acquainted to what was asked. And then, you know, I know you guys got work to do, and that's fine. That's exactly what you should be doing. but I wouldn't mind seeing it. Can I get a copy, please?
For sure, yes, through your worship, we can definitely provide some information. There was a proposal map kind
Yeah,
of
that's
submitted
sort of
that kind of has it laid out, and then as this project progresses, we'll have more information on,
Okay.
once it's solidified
Yeah,
about
yeah,
parking.
I know
'cause-
it's not engraved in stone what you're gonna
Yes.
give me, but it does give me a bit of an idea. Okay,
For
I
sure.
appreciate that, thank you.
Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I was stopped on the street too, and someone asked me, what are these multiple sports? So I could say lacrosse.
Through your worship, we anticipate having basketball hoops on it, so you can play basketball, ball hockey, lacrosse, tennis. Like, would be an enclosed, somewhat, not all the way enclosed, but somewhat enclosed space, soccer, any kind of sport that, you could play around in there, and that you don't want to get muddy on the grass. So I think that's the idea, as far as just people using it for fun. And then as well, to be determined, with working with SEAPARC on potentially renting it out for specific sports. Obviously, lacrosse would be one, and then the others is still to be determined, at least right now.
My understanding was basically any sport that could be played in an arena could be played on that surface. So there was even, there's from outdoors, obviously. So even minor sport hockey for those that, before they transition to ice, could do practice on that surface, any types of drills. So that would be sort of the transfer there. But yeah, I've received a few questions as well. So I think it would just be helpful for council to receive the latest, with the understanding that it's a concept that would tweak, but it would just help, I think, bring clarity as residents have more questions about it.
For sure. We
Yeah.
can definitely, once we have the kickoff meeting, then we'll kind of, can provide council with the most current information that we have, just so that you'll have it at your hands there if you get any future questions, but.
Yeah, and
Oh,
some
yeah,
of
it's
it
super
is,
exciting.
is quite specific, like I've been asked where the floodlights are gonna go, we don't have that level of detail yet, but I know that certainly that is going to emerge as a question, so it's exciting, but it would be good just to get the
I'm just
intel.
really excited that we can get lacrosse into Souk, 'cause
Yes.
my boys played lacrosse years ago, of course. It was fantastic sport, a great one to watch, so I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, no,
personally.
that's excellent. And just to clarify as well, the province is putting $1 million into the sidewalk enhancement project from Otter Point westward. It's been awarded to Ramita Enterprises of Souk, it says here. And the project value, 1.2 million, which includes the 200,000 from the District of Souk. So that's good leveraging on our part to put out 200 for a 1.2 million, right? So that's quite exciting. And that's great news too. Thank you for sharing about, because this naturally triggers questions about the safety of Otter Point. So it's good to see that design work from Highway 14 up Otter Point to Wadhams, which would be great. Thank you for sharing that. It's great. Okay, so item 7, thank you for that update. Public questions and comments. I'm not aware of any correspondence.
Through your worship, no, none was received for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is our consent agenda, item 8. So that's 8.1 to 8.2. And the recommendation is that both 8.1 and 8.2 be adopted by general consent. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Anything to extract?
Yeah, I'd
Councillor
like to
Bateman?
extract the 8.1,
8.1?
Yeah.
Okay.
just to get some further clarity.
Okay, sure. So then we're basically voting on 8.2, okay? So I'll call the question, 8.2 to be adopted by consent. Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. And so that puts 8.1 up for discussion. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear on the process ahead. So I attended the Zoom meeting, and one of the concerns was that the members of the public, or several of them in the room, in the Zoom room that night, felt that there hadn't been enough time given for the public to absorb the contents of these, what is that, 150 pages worth of really intensive planning documents. And the clarity was given that the public has until the end of the month to submit feedback, right? So that's great. So I think we just have to make sure that everyone knows that they are welcome to submit. I think the parks information goes to parks@soop.ca and the transportation to engineering@soop.ca. And I also need I need some clarity around, okay, the staff and consultants will take this feedback and massage it into the plans if indeed it's merited and warranted.
Get a response to that, please?
Ms. Hooper, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, I am. Through your worship to Councillor Bateman, that is the case. We will be receiving feedback via email or in person. We will be doing some stakeholder meetings until the end of the month, and then we will consider all that information and, as appropriate, enter it into the plan and bring it back to council in early September.
Okay, I'd just like to note a couple of the great ideas I heard in the Zoom meeting, and I'm sure staff documented all of it extremely well. One was it would be useful to have in the report for future budget planning purposes the costs in 2020 dollars of key pieces of infrastructure. So that's cost per kilometer for new road surfacing, cost per meter for raised sidewalk, cost of a pedestrian-controlled crosswalk, a bus shelter, these sort of basic pieces so that we'll know whether it's realistic to even be considering some of these things. So that seemed like a good idea. And then there was I think there was the sense too that the plan was very town center centric, was the expression that I heard. And the question was, did it in fact cover the fullness of the region, or was it overly focused on the town center? And I also want to be sure that the points I raised at the Committee of the Whole are addressed, such as the second traffic bridge crossing the Souk River, further details on why a 4-lane highway straight through to Souk has been judged by the Ministry of Transportation to be hugely challenging in terms of cost, topography, and impacts on the ecosystem. And I also wanted to note that it would be wise for the transportation report to include reference to MOTI's Malahat study that came out late last year that ruled out potential alternate routes on forestry roads out of town, because that remains, of course, a huge issue here, is our emergency second route. All right, that's all I have to say. And I think it's just great the public knows that they do indeed have several more weeks to digest these plans.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Anything else from anyone else on items 8.1? One item just to staff that has come up for me is that there are some private landlords that hold undeveloped land, but that the Parks and Trails Master Plan shows potential for a trail network to go through that land. So the concern expressed is that if it's published, and while we may be looking for a future opportunity, is already folks are exploring these trails and then essentially trespassing onto private land. So in some cases, they're leaving garbage behind. There's a risk of discarded cigarettes starting fires and the like. So the concern is that while there may be potential in the future, is there a different way to sort of say that maybe it ends? When we have it as a public trail, fine, but and then you hit a point where it sort of ends because it hits a private parcel. And then once that land comes up to be developed, then we would be looking at where is the best way for this trail to go. But when it goes out there now, there are folks that use this as a way to explore. So then there's some landowners then that are incurring costs to keep their property safe. So I'm just looking if there's some way that we can address that so that they're not out of pocket for something that we may be sort of encouraging. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just don't know the exact answer to that right now.
Okay, so it's just
But yeah, I
something
think
I want to put out there, and I know there's like dots, but some cases, they could be old forestry roads or wildlife trails and the like, so then you just keep following it, but you are actually no longer on a municipal, and then, well, this shows that I can go all the way to here, from this point to that point, so, but they're actually not public. They're not public trails yet. They're still to be determined. They're dotted lines, but when there's a map, people will follow it. So that's something that we may need to consider, even from our own liability perspective, as folks get around.
Definitely. And yeah, I will connect with Ms. Hooper and just kind of confirm the messaging on that, and maybe there's different, some more different descriptions we could possibly put on those maps or something, just to really
Or
highlight.
it may just have to end, our line ends, and then there's maybe a square or something that says potential for future trail, you know, without showing the line from here, especially if there's a lake or a river or something through it. It'd be much, I know Councillor Lajeunesse has shared that you have property on the Sauk River, so if someone saw, oh, there's a trail here, I'm gonna go camping on that beautiful beach down there by the river, and then you show up with your family to enjoy, and there's a bunch of us hanging out there, maybe a bit odd, when it's your private parcel that you've gone to enjoy. So, it's, you know, it's just that sort of sentiment in terms of, that would need to be made very clear.
For sure. We'll definitely take note of that and make sure that's addressed in future versions that are out publicly in
Yeah.
the plan, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so for here, these are our, from our committee of the whole, that council received the Parks and Trails Master Plan draft report for information. Council authorized public engagement on the Parks and Trail Master Plan. We received the Transportation Master Plan draft for information, and that we authorized public engagement on the Transportation Plan draft report. Moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything further on this item? Right, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, item 9, reports. First one up, 9.1, Lot A RFEOI update. And we have a report here with a recommendation. I'll turn it to staff, please.
Thank you. This report's an update to the Lot A request for expression of interest. On May 22nd, the request for expression of interest was posted on the District, BC Bid, and Civic Info websites, and potential interested parties were provided a link to the request as well. Unfortunately, at the closing on June 29th, the District did not receive any submissions to the request. Staff believe from discussions with developers that the Lot A plan is ambitious, and determining a profit was difficult, which deterred submissions. Moving forward, opportunities for development of Lot A may exist through alternative partnerships, with the Capital Regional District being one potential partner. The Capital Region Housing Corporation has 46 properties throughout the region, although none of those are located within Sauk. With that, staff is seeking direction from Council to begin discussions with the Capital Region Housing Corporation on development options for Lot A. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes?
I guess I'm a little confused as to, I mean, I got the charrette here for Lot A, and there was, 3, 6, 9, 12, about 15 items, of which one was just very seniors affordable housing, but there's youth center, public gas service, municipal hall. Why are we going down this housing? What's the push on that? There's some people in the community that are feeling that, we don't need to rush in with Lot A. We can use this for future municipal hall, the police station, a town center, any number of things. Why, after all those things like a youth center, public plaza, farmers market, future connection, evergreen, all sorts of stuff here, and we're going down with housing? What kind of housing are we looking at here?
The answer to that is that there isn't any specifics to the housing type. What we're suggesting is just to open up a dialogue on development options for Lot A, and through that process, staff's intent would be to see what resources are available from the Capital Regional District that kind of help with garnering some more interest in the area, and then through that process, then we would be potentially in a position where we could add other pieces like a municipal hall or a parks area, commercial, whatever the case might be. But what we're looking for at this point is, one, some of the resources and experience that the Capital Regional District has from their 46 other properties going through this process, and then seeing if any of our other Lot A charrette proposed uses could then also be tied into there, and then kind of redesign the approach that we could take at this point, just given that right now what's being put out there didn't receive any responses back. So we're looking for another approach and just gaining some support from the regional district, if that is an option. Right now, we're looking just to open up a dialogue.
Okay, then that's a follow-up. Okay, I have it clear that this is just to start the discussion. If anything comes out of it, then we would get a report before moving ahead. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I noted that in the request that children's daycare wasn't actually mentioned. Youth center was, but I'm not sure. I think that provincial money is still potentially on the table for that sort of work. And I was curious as to whether or not that could actually be included in any conversations with the CRHC. Get it confused with a whole bunch of other acronyms. The other thing was, as Councillor Beddoes was mentioning, I'd really like to see something happening on the first floor. I looked at some of the developments that this particular entity's been involved with, and all of them were essentially full-on affordable housing. You know, every unit, every square inch was basically affordable housing. So given that their mandate, which I also checked into, is also affordable housing, I'll be curious to see whether or not they can actually, you know, kind of stretch that mandate to include other things. Looking forward to finding that out for sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything from Councillor Bateman? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I might as well jump in. One of the reasons, here in, this is the latest stage of a series of steps that have got us to this point in time, and it dates back over X number of years. The EOI went out on the day that a new funding window for BC housing projects opened, and that's open until mid-January of next year. And as I've said before here, this is kind of a golden age of housing. It could well be short-lived, and our housing needs assessment has identified the need for further housing in Souk, affordable housing. And BC Housing this would be through the Capital Region Housing Project. They would be the nonprofit housing operator who would work with BC Housing, who would exclusively fund it through the Regional Housing First Fund. There is a 20%, I'm not clear exactly, but there is some amenities that BC Housing will fund for anything that the people within the building are using. So the residents within that building, provided they were using, and ideally this would be our senior youth center as identified repeatedly in the Lot A report, which we as a council endorsed a year ago. But yeah, I think I would definitely urge you, I did raise this at the Capital Region Housing Corp meeting. I asked Kevin Lorette, the general manager, I just simply said, how does a community advocate? Because to me, I always was struck by the fact that there were these Capital Region housing projects, 46 of them. The closest is on the Colwood border of Langford. So somehow we've been cut out of the pie. And wonderful to investigate and see what might happen in time. Again, with us as council still having full authority over any proposals coming forward, right? So that's it.
Okay. Councillor St. Pierre?
This was something else that did come to mind when I looked at this particular item on the agenda, and that was just something that I believe Councillor Jeunesse was interested in at one point, which was just a development corporation. Now, my understanding is that we simply don't have the wherewithal within our tax base to actually have our own development corporation. But if I understand correctly, we're hoping to get some of that information and some of that capacity from the CHRC. Essentially utilizing them as a development corporation. Is that, would that be accurate?
That's correct. What we would be looking at is using existing corporation model through the Capital Regional District to assist with development opportunities that the district might be interested in. And at the same time, it's also increasing staff's presence in terms of dialogue with the Capital Regional District. So it's not just the housing piece. That's the intent would be the in route with this, and then if directed through the Housing Corporation, specifically as Councillor Bateman had mentioned with Kevin Lorette on the planning section, if there's other suggestions that different portions of the Capital Regional District could suggest that we further explore, staff already now has that open dialogue with the Capital Regional District to then explore further. So this is kind of the foot in the door, and then exploring through their potential resources that are available, reporting back to council what are our future options now at looking at development for Lot A.
Well, it sounds like a very frugal and SUC-appropriate avenue to explore.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable proceeding. One is that we haven't developed our strategic plan for the next while. And to me, that would be something that we would want to talk about at length. I mean, I'm not convinced about putting housing on Lot A myself. I don't know how everybody else sits with it at the moment, but that's something that we should be working out with a strategic plan, among other things. So I understand, you say just an exploratory, but that does take staff's time. And my understanding is part of the strategic plan is direction from us where we want the staff to put their resources. I don't know how many resources this would take, but I'm not comfortable with moving with just one portion of this. So just getting my 2 bits in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. I think where it falls is in our last update on the strategic plan, as we did sort of mention the development of Lot A, and that's what triggered the the expression of interest to go out. So I'm fine to, I support the resolution just to get more information in terms of what possibilities exist. While I agree that our housing needs assessment showed that there's a need for more housing, I also feel there's a need for more commercial space and just space for a number of things. So that's where I'd like to see if it's the case, just get the information. So if it comes back that we can put amenity space to meet the needs of the residents, I'm not entirely sure, but if it's an amenity space that services another community need, I'd be more receptive. Is there a way to have a floor of commercial space in there or other community space? If it's a 6-story building, can the main and second floor be something other than housing? Like, I'd like to just get that information and see where it goes without committing. It may also have been the timing of this, because this came out right when, the world's changing under our feet here. And I wonder that once the library actually breaks ground and there's shovels and people working in there, that might spur more interest, because we know that the library is moving very close to breaking ground, but I think with the community, they'll believe it when they see it. We at a time had put blue fencing around the library lands, and it almost gave the impression that there was going to be shovels showing up any day, and that of course it was an illusion. It didn't actually, so there's all of that. So it could just be the timing, but I think this will help us if we decide, okay, let's send it out again. Getting more information from what our staff can find, we'll then see what we need to adjust, if anything, and have that further conversation. So it's supported in that way. Okay. All right, so for here now, this is that council directs staff to contact the Capital Region Housing Corp to discuss partnership opportunities related to the development of Lot A being 6671 Wadhams Way. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Anything further on the motion? Councillor St. Pierre.
I would just like to say that I do support Councillor Beddoes in not having strictly housing on this particular site. I think it's too important in terms of, as you've mentioned, amenities. I would actually like to see commercial space there as well. There's a lot of other things that I'd like to see other than strictly affordable housing. If the CRHC can't do that, then I think we have to look elsewhere or put it off. But I am interested in finding out what they can do for us.
Yeah, if it's mixed use or something, right? Let's just get information. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm inclined to support the motion as long as staff, and I believe they have at this particular point in time, heard my concerns. And when they do start these discussions, and same with Councillor St. Pierre, that it's, before I would be inclined to vote for anything in the way of housing, there's going to have to be something a lot more going with it other than housing. So with that being said and that being noted by staff, I'm more than happy to proceed.
Councillor Bateman, then Lajeunesse?
Yeah. So I'd just like to point out that the Lot A report is, in fact, housing is one piece of the Lot A report. There's a primary healthcare center. There's a whole series of things that is well documented. And the Lot A report also speaks of a rezoning, because the whole lot is currently P2, institutional uses only, and I think that Mr. Bylaw, in his understanding of the lack of submissions, it's based on the fact that there's no revenue stream, right, as you stated. So I think a rezoning of the property would help considerably.
Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I agree with basic sentiments of everyone that that space should be a mixed-use facility, that housing could be a component of it, but I certainly don't want to see the entire thing turned into housing. There should be some public amenities as well as commercial space there.
Good, okay, we'll see what, get more information, and then we can see, to your zoning question, I don't disagree with you, Councillor Bateman, but I think it's just when you go to public hearing and the public asks, well, what is it going to be? And we say, it could be any of this, any of these uses. It's a hard one, like, you know, and I suppose there was a push to zone it to a town center zone, which has like a wide variety of uses. So that's where I think it's just getting clarity of realizing, okay, what is the vision we're trying to realize? Because then it could be rezoned, it could be more attractive, but then what is it that we're putting there? And that's the question that until we really clinch that down is very difficult to answer. Rebuttal. Go ahead.
And of course, there is in the Lot A report a sample zoning,
Yes.
which is because I know you in 2017 went through a major public hearing where there was a lot of pushback to a proposal to commercially zone that land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just, you know,
Yeah.
but I think I look forward to staff responding back to us, and perhaps that might be a recommendation that they may want to consider. Sorry, Mr. Paulo, I must almost called you Mr. Matthew again. It's just catching your name. So staff, once they get that intel, can share that and maybe provide any other recommendations on what we could do here, if anything. Okay. All right. So on that, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next one up is 9.2, committee structure and function. So there's a recommendation here. I'll get staff to maybe expand a bit on this one, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. During a discussion of committee appointments several months back, there was a general discussion about the vacancies that have been around long-term. We have had 3 postings out, well, I guess 2 for quite a few months. We've got vacancies on the Climate Action Committee, and we've had a vacancy on our Board of Variance for many, many months. And we did receive interest from an individual for the Board of Variance who seemed very keen, but they didn't qualify to be appointed to the board because of the committee structure and function policy, which requires them to be a Sauk resident. So I've brought forward this amendment that will allow council to appoint at their discretion, of course, anybody who lives in the Sauk region or Sauk area, and it would be up to council to look at each application on a case-by-case basis and determine if that's an appropriate location and to be part of whichever committee that they're applying to be in or be on. So that's the general gist of what is contained in the policy change. We also took the opportunity to just put this one into the policy framework template, update some outdated references, and just generally improve readability of the document. So that's what's in front of you today.
Thank you for that, Ms. Machada. Councillor St. Pierre?
2 questions. One is what defines Sauk region. It seems to be at the discretion of council from what you've just said. I'm wondering if it might be possible to, or useful to actually kind of define that more clearly so that anybody who's applying actually knows that they're actually within the region that would be approved. So for example, East Sauk, Otter Point seems pretty straightforward. Metchosin, you know, you probably want to go to Metchosin. So I'm wondering if what we're really saying here is we want people from East Sauk and Otter Point to be, you know, within the region, and then just define it. I'd rather not have to wrangle at some later point to figure out, you know, what that actually means, but that's me. The second thing is, and this is a larger discussion that came up at one of our recent meetings, is we still haven't actually determined how many committees we're likely to have and what the structure is likely to be. So when I saw this item come up, I thought that's what this would be about. Upon reading the package, I realized that's not the intent. I'm ready to move forward with this as is. But I was wondering if there was any indication of when we might be looking at number of committees, resources for committees, and what kind of structure we want at that level.
I would think that one is more a question for our CAO, Mr. McInnes, but with the OCP committee and the existing committees, we've got the public health, sorry, I can never remember what it's actually called.
Primary Health Working Services Group.
Yes. The Climate Action Committee, the SPA Committee Resurrecting, and the Official Community Plan. We are at capacity for administrative support. So if there are any others that council would want to look at, we would need to bring that forward for consideration of additional resources.
And just to follow up, I think one of the committees that came out of our recent work was the idea of a Protective Services Committee. And certainly there seems to be a fair amount of support on council for that sort of thing. I think one of the reasons for re-examining the committee structure was so that we could potentially, for example, have working groups that might be protective services or SPA or whatever. But that ideally we could actually have a smaller number of committees that would include some of the other work that we need to do. And so we don't necessarily have to exclude some of the important work. And so I think we, even more so, as we reach capacity in terms of staff resources, by simply having added on committees as we go, there's more reason to actually re-examine the structure so we can actually do what we needed to without excluding important work.
Okay, so I think that'll be sort of more work that we'll be delving into down the road a little bit. Yeah, well, I think that's where we're looking to schedule a Part 2 workshop so we can actually hash that out a bit. You know, this wasn't, you know, I thank you for raising it, but part of it is I'm not against committees. I just, what are we looking to accomplish with them? Because we have committees, they come for recommendations, and then we don't like any. Sometimes we don't counsel, not we, but in councils. Thank you very much, but we're not endorsing any of these recommendations. So then the committee gets disheartened because they've done all this work only to have and nothing happen. So then why did we have the committee if we're not going to do anything that they bring forward anyway. Sometimes, you know, we come up with a good problem to solve, so send it out to committee. I think SPA is an excellent example of some initiatives that need to break out in a way. So I think that's where we can regroup on that. Councillor Beddoes?
Well, again, it keeps going back to the strategic plan of which we're supposed to reschedule and get it done, because then that gives council the ability to say, these are important to us, and then staff to come back and say, well, we can only staff for the 6 you recommended. What is your priorities? And that I like. That's exactly what we should be doing. But I don't think we're there yet. I think we do need to hash the plan out of what committees we want. And again, we look at those committees and we say, what do we want them to do for us? What sort of thing are we looking for? Rather than just do a sort of pie in the sky type committee. We're looking for something specific here, and they hash out the details. So, but that comes at a strategic plan, and that's where we all get together. And I've personally been very pleased with the ones we've done in the past, where we sat down and hashed it out and pretty much come to a consensus of where we want to go in the next 6 months to a year. And I'm hoping we do that again sometime fairly soon. I know it's a difficult schedule thing, and I understand that. Yeah. But we, you know, to move forward in an intelligent manner as a council, we need a plan. Yeah. I mean, even in the States, they need a plan, but they're not getting it. But we want to do one better than that, have a plan, and then staff can say to us whether they can staff it or not, so.
Yeah, and that's part, rather than just, oh, let's have this committee.
Yeah.
And, you know, okay, that's a nice to have, but what are the what is the mandate?
What's the
And
goals?
what is the intent? We can form any number of committees, but we don't, so, you know, whereas for others, it was very specific, going again to SPA, because here's some outstanding things, a number of projects that we want them to take away, and there's a whole list I kept firing when I was talking to Councillor Lajeunesse. So, well, make sure you remember this and this and this and this and this and this and this. There's probably about 10 things right on the go that and then we either need to do them or take them off, because there are loose ends out there that need to either be completed or they need to be removed, one or the other, because they're all they need to be tightened up. But there was well, we need to form this committee. Well, what is the intent of it? And I agree, we need to have that conversation and then see what the next step is. Councillor Beddoes again.
Now, back to what's in front of us.
Yes.
I'm happy with the way it is, because I know there's some talk about what geographical area, but it comes back to us anyways. So if somebody comes from Oak Bay, you know, we tell them, sorry. But I mean, if somebody comes from Otter Point or Port Renfrew, we may say, fine, but the decision is ours, and that's where it should be. So I'm okay with the motion.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's, you know, initially I'm like, no, I'm not going to support that. But you're right. Like, there are areas where many people are heavily engaged in our community and have been for a long time. They just may have then chosen to move outside our boundary.
There's one right here.
Exactly. And looking at one. So, and there are many, right, you know, that are invested strongly in our community. So this is good. Councillor St. Pierre?
I'm fine with moving ahead without a clear definition on the area of Souk. Let me, the buck does stop here. We can make the decision. I would have preferred some clarity, but that's okay. I can do without. I would like just to add, in terms of, you know, any further committee structure, I'm also interested in looking at alternatives. For example, task forces, short duration, clear intent, clear missions, get it done, get it over with. I'd just like to know how we can actually best move ahead with the work, and what structures we can use with the resources we have on hand. But I think it's a conversation that, if I understand correctly, will be happening with the strat plan, some further strat plan conversation?
Yes, in August. So we're looking, we had a date sort of plan that doesn't work, so we're just looking to regroup in August for that.
Fine, so we're looking at it, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I had just a couple, through you to Ms. Oh, damn. Why do I have such trouble with that name, Mushada? Just a couple of things. Under definitions, under select committee, in the final line there, it says at least one member must be a council member and includes advisory committees. So I wasn't quite clear what you meant about that. So you might want to rethink that. And then just a comment around the committee member selection process. So staff will advertise, in the weekly council column in the local newspaper. Now, of course, we don't have a weekly council column, so that was back in 2006 we did. And of course, last year at AVIC and the UBCM, the only time Souk were mentioned, apart from our mayor, was our resolution to amend the statutory advertising regulations. And do I assume that until those regulations are amended, we can only advertise in a local newspaper?
That is correct.
So I'm wondering whether we could also add, if not advertising, at least a line around extensive posting on social media by our new communications coordinator, for example. Because it is something of a challenge to get nominees.
Sorry, can you just let me know which page you're on, under which
I'm on
section?
page 1, item A1.
Okay.
And I think you might want to add a line about social media being a good pool in which to fish.
Yeah, and it may say,
sorry.
just add a bullet in that says, and other electronic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I will take that back. The advertising for community volunteers is not a statutory requirement. So in this case, we are not required to post only in the newspaper. So.
And I guess the other thing, one person who's been applying for a committee has been asked for a resume. And I'm wondering whether, does it state within this policy document exactly what's required for an applicant?
No, it does not. I believe that was just a very specific request for the applications for the official community plan committee. It's not
okay.
typically required for any of our other advisory committees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have some recommendations here, and the first one is that, can this all be done together?
It should be done together because one doesn't stand on its own without the other.
Very good, okay. That the committee structure and function policy 2006 be rescinded, and that council adopt policy C0-007, committee structure and function policy. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next up, 9.3 is proposed dog park in John Phillips Memorial Park.
And I'm working on it. I'm trying to get the PowerPoint up. Here we go. Thank you, Your Worship. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
It's odd, but let's just see. Anybody know how to change that? Sorry, please don't be distracted by the words on the side. So, Your Worship, as you know, there are a number of dogs, or a large number of dogs in Souk, and the district is lacking an off-leash dog park, which is typical in communities our size, having a off-leash dog park. Dog owners in Souk compensate for this void by the unsanctioned use of School District 62 and Souk Community Association's sports fields and soccer fields. This dog use is in conflict with other user groups because the waste left behind when no one is looking can be quite upsetting for others using the parks. The Souk Community Association is proposing a partnership with the District of Souk to construct an off-leash dog park in John Phillips Memorial Park. It's been a positive response to the social media and the article in the Souk News Mirror. And it appears that a off-leash dog park in John Phillips Park is something historically that would be supported. So the slide that you see here is the proposed area, generally speaking, of where an off-leash dog park could be developed. And the next slide shows you in the bottom right-hand corner, close to the intersection of Wadham's Way, where that originally was proposed in the preferred arrangement of 2006. So it's pretty evident that there is a need in the community. There's a long history of conversations about dog parks in the District of Sauk, going back as far as 2006 and 2007. But so far, none of them have come to fruition. So this partnership with the Sauk Community Association is a really great opportunity for the district to work with them and to acquire something that the community has indicated that it needs. So staff is seeking direction from council to develop a plan to design and construct a destination-level off-leash dog park at John Phillips Memorial in partnership with the Sauk Community Association. The plan, so who will build what, who will be responsible for what, would be then brought back to council with specifics like location, size, design, budget, what kind of in-kind support we'll have, and then the maintenance requirements moving forward. The project will also engage the community volunteers via the Sauk Region Volunteers Center perhaps, and be built to district standards and be maintained, we expect, by the District of Sauk. So that's the end of the formal presentation, Your Worship, and the recommendation that is in front of you, and if I can get Sarah to, or staff to put that up, is that you direct staff, to develop a plan and funding options for an off-leash dog park at John Phillips Park for your consideration in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hooper. I know that this has been around for quite some time, and I'm supportive of this. What I would like to see back, though, when the report comes back to us, is just where precisely it is. Like, I know it shows sort of the general area, but then it would be nice to actually see, here's where the fencing would be, what sort of square footage like what is it, how big is it actually, what are the sort of rules of use. Could someone who is not fond of dogs still enjoy the park and avoid the area? Like right now it looks like it's right off the trail, like it's right in the trail, so if you're going through you will have to pass it. So what does that look like? I know that there's a lot of dog lovers, but not everyone is fond of dogs. So how, that would be like, okay, I don't want to go anywhere near that. So how do you get around it? There's also a concern that some folks will continue to use the other areas. And is there then any sort of, is there any obligation then by the district that then we would assume any type of responsibility on either SD 62 lands or community association lands? Like they're their lands, and it's unfortunate, but not you could say there's a dog park, take your dog to it, and some will and some won't, right? They're like, no, I've walked my dog here forever and I'm not going to. So that's that element. I think that, it's a great start. So just looking forward to more information and then what it'll look like. And then there's some folks that would like to continue to play ball or frisbee with their dog who is completely under command, but may use the more uphill area to do that. So would that activity still be allowed? Like, is there a change? Is this expected to change our policy in any way right now where dogs are under command, owner's command? And I know that, again, is subject to the owner and the dog, but I've received some queries that are we now going to go full on leash? And I know our Parks and Trails Master Plan has that dialogue. So there's just more of that conversation that we need to have. And what if there is a big dog fight in the park? And just like, that's just the rules and what happens in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it is good to socialize and take your dog out and to be able to do that in a contained area without it running off. So, but there is just some outstanding pieces, I think, and we'll be good to go. Okay, questions, comments? Councillor Bateman, then St. Pierre.
Okay, wonderful that the Sauk Community Association has come forward. When I first read this article in the Sauk News Mirror, I noted it was Sauk resident Herb Haldane who'd brought it forward, and they failed to mention the Community Association. So it's great that it's the Community Association stepping up. I had a few questions for you to Ms. Hooper. When you talk about a destination level off-leash dog park, that sounds quite special. Could you, no, seriously, because these are tourist attractions, and some in Canada are quite an attraction, yeah. So could you speak to that?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bateman. The Parks and Trails Master Plan draft talks about two different types of dog parks. So one would be destination or community level, where people would drive to sometimes and park and then use the facility. And then the other type of dog park could be a neighborhood level, where it would be, say, within a 15-minute walk of any of the residents. So the destination or community level would be a larger type facility, and then the neighborhood level would be these smaller ones that you would, say, have in a small pocket park that would be maybe the typical lot size of the neighborhood, as just a place to, after dinner, go and throw a small ball for your dog. So those are the two types. And the Parks and Trails Master Plan, further to that, suggests that we have those destination levels or community levels, two of them in the district, one south of the highway and one north of the highway.
Thank you. Where am I going next? The big blank. Yeah, so I did some research, as I tend to do, and found that in 2013, when this came up, Mayor Milne at that time identified that the park needed to be on high ground, high and dry location. Now, the spot that has been identified in the agenda tonight, I believe, is a bit marshy in the winter. And I think the reason the Ponds Park corridor was identified back then as the best possible town center location was because it was high and dry.
So through your worship, you're right. The Ponds Park corridor is, quote, high and dry. And it would be an easy win. There would be limited excavation that you'd have to do and limited materials. Though if we do site properly in John Phillips Park, and the square that you saw on the map is just for a generalization only, but there are some high ridges on that south side of the trail, and we could be creative with fencing and with excavation and perimeter drains, etc., curtain drains, and create quite a good spot, we think. And so there's still a lot of work to do. Don't get us wrong that we think that this, we're just going to jump right into it. There's a lot of planning that has to happen, but staff is looking for that direction to just get started. And it might turn out that a better location within the park is determined, but this is the initial thoughts.
And one more relates to the park's plans call for a master plan, a public process master plan for all of John Phillips. And I raised this with the consultant in the Zoom room and asked, is this cart before the horse kind of scenario? Her comment was, no, this is the kind of easy infrastructure that we put in place and moved on if there's a higher use at a later time. So in the shorter term, it seems like moving ahead is absolutely viable and doable.
Great, thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should just get on with it. And I like the idea of partnering with the community association. I think it's about time that we did some projects with them. And as far as locating the dog park adjacent to existing trails, if you plant trees and sort of put a visual barrier in there, the dogs won't be tempted to run at people walking along the trail and vice versa.
Great, thank you. Councillor St. Pierre?
First, I'd just like to say thank you. Been waiting. It seems like the community's been waiting for a long time, so that's awesome work on your part, and wonderful to see the community association coming on board with that, or leading the way, as the case may be. I'm really interested in the neighborhood level parks, and wondering about destination level versus neighborhood. And I'll be interested in whether or not your plan actually has anything on, further options to promote those, because I think that you got people in Whiff and Spit and all Sun River and so on and so forth. There's lots of places that are going to be just too far away, and we don't necessarily want to have every car in Souk heading over so people can walk their dog. I think people are still going to use, for example, community association fields if it's too far away. So I'll be interested to see what happens, but this is an awesome start, and thank you for that.
No, Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to leave it in Ms. Hooper's hands. I think she's heard pretty much everything we had to say, and I don't think any of it's any news to her. And that's what we pay the park staff to do, come back with something, and I look forward to seeing what she has to produce.
No, that's great. Yes, and I recall the discussion. So I know there's a good file on this, and I think the second graph, or the second map is from, is it 2005 or 2006? When the visioning document was there. So it's great to see some of these elements actually come to life now. So thank you very much for your work on this, Ms. Hooper, and for bringing it forward. And I do agree that it would be great to work with the Souk Community Association on a joint initiative here, knowing it's not going to solve, this is not going to solve, is not the answer for every dog in Souk, right? So, but it's a case of addressing, filling a need for some of them, and we can see how it goes. And then as other developments come forward, it's a case, really, you'd want to cite something within that location so that folks are not driving all over to the one and only dog park. And that's where it depends. And then I was just talking to my brother about this, like one of his little dogs got banned from the dog park. And so has to wait, this is in the town of Banff, and he has a lot of dogs, but it has to wait in the car while the other ones play in the dog park, because they all know how to play nicely, but the little one doesn't. So it's just the nature of different types of dogs, right? And it varies. So, but you could have a lot of fun with it. You could have like a fire hydrant in it. There's a lot of interesting elements that you could add, given our proximity to the fire department and whatever. Those are all things that we've talked about. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, just on that subject, in many dog parks, there are fenced-off areas for the smaller dogs, and then the bigger
Yeah.
dogs romp, so.
Sometimes smaller dogs
serve
are
multiple
more.
uses.
Those are the ones you gotta worry about.
The ankle biters.
They are. They're, and it just depends on the personality of the dog. So it's quite funny. It's true. Okay, so this is great, and I believe it was in our capital plan for 2021.
Correct, there was a line item,
Okay.
generic dog park, $50,000 to come from casino funds, so any partnership with other organizations would be welcomed.
That would be welcome, considering this pretty much elimination of casino revenue, and I think it's going to be quite some time before we see any of that come through. So it is good to forge ahead in a different way. So I appreciate everyone's effort on this. Okay, so we have a motion, a proposal here, and that is that council directs staff to develop a plan and funding options for an off-leash dog park in John Phillips Memorial Park for council consideration. Moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. At some point, it would be nice to get a sign for John Phillips Memorial Park. We don't actually have a sign anywhere that.
I'll get a spot on that.
Another thing to add to your list, Councillor Lajeunesse. Okay. All those in favor of the resolution? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're getting into item 10, which is our bylaw section here. So the first one here is the records management bylaw, and that is the bylaw cited as records management bylaw number 779, 2020 be adopted. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Questions? None, all in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. Next up is 10.2, and that is that the bylaw cited as Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw number 781, 2020 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Questions, comments, anyone? All those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. 10.3, that the bylaw cited as firearms regulation bylaw repeal bylaw number 787, 2020 be adopted. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Questions? Anyone? Anyone? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. 10.4, so this one here, maybe I'll just pause. So that is, you may recall last year, we had discussed how Port Renfrew would like to remove themselves from the SEAPARC service. So this came to the board last week. There's just been a bit of a delay, and while we had consented to that in the past, part of the finishing process is that it does need to come back to us to consent or not consent as it is here. One item that I did raise was the governance structure, in that how the SEAPARC Commission is comprised has elected representative, Director Hicks, and a public member, and then there's myself as CRD Director with Councillor Bateman as alternate. Councillor Beddoes is appointed as a councillor, 2 members of the public. So with some of the population of the electorate, the JDF going off and the dollar value changing, how can we address the governance? So one conversation that I had was that we could simply, and the CRD staff will bring this up, we could look to add another public member from SUC, and to create, then it almost creates a 75-25 or whatever the ratio is split. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but we could look to just increase 1 member of the public to represent SUC. So that'll be a piece that'll come from the CRD, but it was an item that I raised there. So at this point, are there any questions about this? It makes sense, and I will also confirm that SEAPARC staff did go through all of the registration and the like, and there's no interest from Port Renfrew. It's just too far, and which is why I totally support their removal from this. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, so here then, it'll be then that council consent to the CRD adopting bylaw number 4362, SUC and Electoral Area Recreation and Facility Service, establishing bylaw number 1, 2016, amendment bylaw number 1, 2020. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Anything further? See none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Any new business items? Nope, okay, just checking. 12, correspondence requiring action. So we received a very kind letter from the mayor of Natori City. So I just wanted to share this with you here, and I would like to write a response back, but I felt that I just wanted to share this with you. So basically a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Questions? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. The next one is 12.2, correspondence from Sherry Ridout regarding antenna sitting and small cell arrangement policy. Councillor St. Pierre?
Unfortunately, this particular letter came with some other documents, and they basically laid out what seemed like a pretty reasonable path to coming up with a more clear policy around, cell towers and so on and so forth. I realize that that's not on our strat plan right now. It's not necessarily high priority, but it did actually provide a nice template for, trying to rationalize some of this and make it clear to the public and so on, how we were going to be dealing with cell towers. I was hoping we could actually potentially make use of this, but I'm not clear on where to take it from here. I just know that the additional documents that are not in this package right now did provide some good pathways to doing that. And they seem to be reasonable, like fair, even-handed about the whole thing. And I know that we dealt previously with the cell tower that was quite contentious, and I would have appreciated, some clear policies, and this would actually move us in that direction. So not sure where to take it right now. I know that our staff is always busy.
Probably to our planning department as they receive applications.
Through your worship, I was just suggest that we'll make sure that our planning department does get copies of both this document and the others that were provided as templates. And I believe that the telecommunications policy does need a review, so we'll make sure that they get all of that in their consideration.
You're a wonder. Thank you.
Okay, so for now, just to receive for information. Okay, moved by Councillor St. Pierre then, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Anything further? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Here's a letter 12.3. This is from Mayor Helps of Victoria regarding modular housing for homelessness. It's here for your information. She's also offered to present to our council. Anyway, Councillor St. Pierre?
The CMP also requesting support. I have two requests.
Yes.
Could your council pass a motion supporting in principle the addition of modular housing with supports to your housing stock, signaling to the province that your local government is a willing partner in addressing the regional challenge of homelessness, which we should be. And two, could your council pass a motion calling on the federal government to match provincial funding for modular housing units? So, that's on page 2 of the letter.
Page 2 of the letter, so there's two requests there. My only concern is, I'm fine with the item 2, to call on the feds to match provincial funding for the modular units. In terms of 1 is, do we have the resources to offer supportive housing in our community? Many of our agencies are volunteer-run. So are we at a point where we can actually offer supportive housing? Like, that's a question I don't know the answer to at this moment. Councillor St. Pierre?
I think this is only saying pass a motion supporting in principle the addition of this type of housing to our potential housing stock. So I don't think we're really making a very deep commitment other than letting the province know that we're potentially interested in this type of housing. It doesn't mean that we have to have, land for it or other partnerships or anything else. It's signaling the province that, yes, we have a homelessness issue and we're interested in solutions, I think is what this is going towards. Because in principle, pass a motion of supporting in principle, I don't think that puts us on the hook for very much, to be honest.
Well, I think it does, just given the certain circumstances. I don't know that, I don't know, whenever anything becomes, when we have a resolution, it becomes a resolution that then our staff take away and use to guide their work. And I am aware that we have challenges here. I'm just not convinced that we have enough. So let's say then the province buys a parcel of land and does something with it that is within their purview to do. They would look back in this resolution. But do we have adequate resources at this time? And I don't feel that we do, given that our crisis center is now closed and everything else is pretty much volunteer, like Search-In is volunteer run, though they have some funding and they receive grants to offer some paid work. It's all volunteer, shelter, like they're all volunteers. Our food bank, which is one of our main, is all volunteer run right now. So I'm not comfortable supporting this. Like, I'm fine with number 2, but I'm not ready for number 1. Councillor Beddoes, please.
Yeah, I need a great deal more information than what I have here. It may be fine. I'd rather leave it to, if it looks like it's something important that one of us wants to bring up, when we start doing a strategic review, throw it in the mix and see what comes out of it. No, it's one of those nebulous things that could be just about anything under the sun. And I concur with our mayor that I'd rather not get us committed to anything at this point in time. I'd just like to receive this as received correspondence for now.
Okay, are you making that as your motion, to receive for information?
I make a motion, receive for information.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Okay, anything further, Councillor Beddoes?
No, I pretty much said it is, this is good information, but I'm a little reluctant to go any further with it until I get a better grasp, and maybe other councillors do have a better grasp on it, but I don't, and I'm not feel comfortable with going ahead until I do. So I just like to receive it for now, and hopefully in our strategic plan, that if it's important to any one of us, that we get to discuss it, and I'd be more than happy to be enlightened about it, but right now I don't.
Thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse is the seconder.
Yeah, I just think we don't have enough information really, and unless other levels of government are willing to support it and staff it, then we're not really in a position to do this.
Thank you. Councillor, I'll go to Councillor Bateman for a first time.
Yeah, I thought I understood it. I pictured it as, or interpreted it as one of these City of Victoria big visionary, heart-centric motions that they make a lot of in the city. And when I saw wraparound health services, I was thinking that this sort of initiative is an aspirational drive to get locked down support for these health services. However, I do fully agree that we lack information here, and I'll be voting in favor of the motion.
Thank you. Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a couple of things. I would suggest that if we lack information, given that Mayor Helps has offered to provide more information, we should probably avail ourselves. I think that potentially cutting ourselves out of an opportunity to deal with some of the needs that have been identified in our housing needs assessment. So we have people that are homeless. We have people that need wraparound supports. We're actually dealing with them right now, as has been noted. This is potentially an opportunity to get more resources. We don't know whether or not that's going to cost us and what kind of strings might be attached, but I think we should find out what they are before actually potentially cutting ourselves off. So I don't know if this motion as it stands leaves us kind of out of it, or leaves us with a path forward if there's utility in this particular process. But I'm worried that it's leaving us out of it.
I don't feel that it's leaving us out of it. Councillor Beddoes raised our strategic plan, and that is something that we want to stick to. So I think it's the case that as we go forward is looking and seeing where we want to make a priority, because even if we were to receive information, that's fine. What do we do with it? And then we need to give direction through our CEO to staff in terms of what do we want to work on. So I think that's the place where it lands. We're learning a lot on our own situation and homelessness is just what the pandemic has brought to light. We also have a large group of stakeholders that are working very well together. So they also, we would see we would learn also from them, because they're the ones that are on the ground delivering the service and working with essential and frontline workers on the ground and getting that intel. And I most certainly would always appreciate hearing from Victoria Mayor on this. However, she also is versed in a more urban Victoria situation, which is different from ours. So I'd like to sort of see where our strategic planning goes. I would also like to see how the coalition, they're looking to regroup. I met with the chair today and suggested that they really need to look into what their governance model is going to be going in the future, what their membership looks like and the like, because having a group of some 80 people is just unwieldy. It's great for sharing information, but sometimes I think I've been on a committee with 100 people, I do that, but in terms, I do sit on one through the Federation where there's over 100 of us on one. But just that all said, it's a very focused meeting, whereas here there's a lot of information sharing. So we're getting into this now, and I think that'll come in time. It's just right now saying, yes, we want modular housing in our community without understanding a lot about it is a bit early. We are kicking off an OCP process. We have our zoning to consideration. So what is going to jump ahead here, and where are we going to rank this in a priority? So I think this is to come. For now, I'm comfortable just receiving this. I do not feel that we're going to be left out, because I think when the time comes, and which may not be too far off, we can think about what our priorities are going to be and then go forward from there, because the problem will continue to grow. Councillor St. Pierre.
would it be possible during a strat plan planning to have more information about what modular housing with supports actually looks like, so that we can actually make a decision with that information? I'm concerned about not having more information on what this actually means. There's no way people want to move forward without additional information, and I don't think we're going to discuss it cogently without more information, so I'd like more information.
But it may not just be modular housing, it's just right now, we have several affordable rental projects coming into Souk. So we have the Hope Center already, and it's being renovated, and we have the 2 Drennan projects that will hopefully kick off in the not-too-distant future that will be affordable rental projects. They're not supportive housing projects. So
One is modular, isn't it?
that's my understanding, is that one is, but it is still attainable rent. It isn't supportive housing. So I think if I were, you know, I think it's the case of anyone can reach out to BC Housing and get that information. But in terms of what does our population need, only our service providers like Searchin would be able to tell us that, because they're working with the population. So what is needed in one community may differ. So I don't think Victoria can answer for us in Souk what we actually need here. And I'm not meaning to be any disrespect to Victoria at all, but I just think that it's an urban-rural different challenge altogether. And I think the intel comes from hearing from our local providers that are doing the work locally within our community right now. And I just know that they're volunteers and they're doing their very best. They're doing an amazing job. Just like our food bank is excellent job, volunteer run. Victoria, it's paid. It's completely different model. So that's, you know, if I was going to start putting supports into anything, it would be into the food bank. And that would be the conversation that we would need to look at having, among many others. But it won't be answered in one. I think there's just more, there's more to come, and I want to hear from our locals first. Okay. All right, so I'll call the question then, that the council receive the correspondence for information and file. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Okay. All right, and okay, so this is an interesting one. 12.4 Correspondence 2020 UBCM meeting requests. So for those of you that have attended UBCM, and I'm just going to brief Councillor Lajeunesse very briefly, is one thing that does happen at UBCM every year, and it'll be done this year as well, is that there's an opportunity to meet with the ministers on matters that are important to our own local community. So in the past, we have met with the minister responsible for safety about seniors driving testing. And that was our specific advocacy ask. We followed up, and they have since responded in a good way for us to pilot a project here in Souk. I think we need to meet with them again and ask them to extend the pilot, because it had a very start and end date. And then, of course, with COVID, none of the driving testing was made possible. So I don't want the end date to remain the same. It needs to be extended. That may be something that we could just do in correspondence, but that's kind of an outstanding item. Other times I've met with the Minister of Transportation to advocate for Highway 14 and bringing in data. These are our challenges. They kind of call it speed dating. You're basically given 20 minutes. And in the past, it would be a room with the minister and their staff. They would have any information from us on hand. We would also provide a briefing document. This is why we want to meet with you, so that they understand what we're from. We have 20 minutes to make our case and we're out, and then the next group comes in. So it's on and on and on. Usually they can accommodate about 3 different requests. This year, the same thing will happen, but they'll be on MS Teams or Zoom likely, because the whole convention is virtual. So they are still looking to provide the opportunity. And so this is where we put in requests for matters that are specific to our community. And that's where we met up with the Minister of Agriculture in Atlanta, Minister Popham in the past. And then we put the requests in, and then we get answers. We also have been, may receive requests to meet with BC Hydro, for example, with Fortis BC, BC Assessment. So just as different matters arise, it's a good opportunity to keep them, and then we put together our ask and then follow up with letters. So it's a good way to build rapport, but also to advocate for what is specific to our community. So when I receive this, I'm automatically, okay, we need to meet with Minister of Education to talk about our schools that we need to have constructed here, and we could share the highlights of our new grant, and we're already looking to develop the land. Let's fund more. Yes, Langford and Colwood are growing, but so are we. We don't want to be left behind. I'd like to meet with the finance minister to talk about cannabis revenue share. 3 out of our 4 shops now are fully licensed. They were deemed an essential service. They've all done exceptional volume. 25% of that was to flow through to local government. It's not coming forward to us. We need new revenue streams. That would be a good one to meet with the Minister of Finance on. We talked with our CMP detachment officer about VIMQ, the Vancouver Island Major Crime Unit. That means that we should be meeting with the Minister, the Solicitor, Mr. Eby, Solicitor General, on how can we make that happen because membership is frozen. Like, there's a number of different things that emerge. So I think it's the case we have this here, but it's almost to the case of what is shovel ready. So these are matters now that have been brewing up in our community for some time. So now's our opportunity to meet in a virtual forum to advocate for them. It's not the case of, oh, we can meet with the ministers. Let's find some stuff. Like, we need to go in prepared with an ask. So this is where you want to look at what are some things that we were sitting on and how is our opportunity to advance them. So those are some that come to me, and as I think about it, I'm thinking, oh, I could also meet with so-and-so and so-and-so. But we at some point need to stop. So I think it's a case of just sort of opening up here, hearing what you folks have to say. Maybe we can finalize it at our next regular meeting. We'll put together some briefing documents. And it's more so that we can then send, yes, we want to meet with this minister for these reasons. And it can just be, it's high-level bullet points so they know what it is we're going in for. And then we would put together notes. I'll have some responsibilities this year at UBCM, so it'll fall on others who are attending if there's an overlap and there's something that I do need. I am going to be chairing a few sessions, so, and typically the UBCM program is the priority. These are the secondary bits that come. This is like the bonus to go to UBCM. It shouldn't be the other way around. But they do overlap. There's always a lot happening. So it will be for some of the counselors then to take our ask forward if I'm not available to be able to do it. And then we follow up with letters and the like. So what are your thoughts? Who would you like to meet with? I shared some. I could probably go on. Councillor St. Pierre.
I've got some Climate Action Committee members that put together a letter when the public engagement thing happened with Highway 14. And some of the elements were not considered specifically pertinent to Highway 14 in that particular project, but it was suggested at the time by Mr. McInnes that this was something that should be brought directly to the minister. I don't know if this is exactly the right venue, but I could make that letter available, or we could maybe have a look at that as well. Something else that came up recently is, for me, was that Nelson has its own utility, and it's using its utility to basically allow financing for individual homeowners for improvements like heat pumps or insulation or solar panels or whatever. They basically pay for it through their electric bills. So you essentially have a financial entity that can actually help do energy retrofits. I'm not sure why BC Hydro isn't doing that kind of thing, but I would love to find out if it's possible, because that would actually allow people across BC and in Souk to actually have those energy retrofits and to finance them. So just a couple of things there. And that'll be for discussion, as I understand it, maybe at another meeting. But I thought I'd throw that out there so people can noodle them over.
I think that would be a letter to BC Hydro for that. And just to find is to get that information and to put into a BC Hydro letter and then to see what their response is. And then if it's subject to provincial policy X, then we would find out who the minister responsible for that policy is and take it that way, for example.
Just those entities, Kootenai Power and the Nelson Power, they have been in business with that for many, many decades. So
Yeah.
they might even be before BC Hydro. So I don't think it's a matter of, they are a separate entity. And they
Separate, so that would make sense. Counselor Bateman.
I didn't have anything in mind, but I'd take on the advocacy with the Ministry of Education, if you want, for Sun River Elementary School. We're growing fast. We're being bumped off the facilities list by Langford, and Royal Bay, I guess, is expanding as well. So I'd be happy, given my experience with EMCS, to take that on,
Thank you.
whatever that entails.
Yeah.
20
so
minutes
this
in the
is-
preparation of some paperwork.
Yeah, and I had met with Minister Fleming in the past, and basically I had a map of Souk that showed where the schools were, where our sewer boundary was, and where the growth is. And so I had always heard that Cecina would need to overflow before it would trigger a new build here in Souk. And my advocacy at the time was that it's not in the growth area. So there isn't as much development in that area, and sewer is not there. So there is, there's some, but not to the extent that we see in places like Churchill Meadows or more within Souk, that this is where the growth is. And yes, while the other communities are growing, we are still also growing. It's not that we're not growing and they are. The need is still here. The other one is the age of the schools.
Right.
And that's where it's a good one to show the age of the school, and also the fact that I think Souk Elementary has had 2 fires in it in the last 10 years. And it's the second oldest school in the province,
Oh, is it?
right?
Okay.
So, and then Cecino's is not seismic ready, and I don't think Souk Elementary has sprinklers in it, and neither does Cecino's for that matter. So there are those elements. We do, of course, have our elected school trustees that do an excellent job representing on our behalf, but at the same time, it's going to the minister and saying, can you enlarge in the budget so that it's not just, you need to make it bigger, and this is our ask, and this is why we're still growing. So these are all good stats that we can bring forward, but then I'd also, what is our fire inspection? What do all those things have to say? They're still going to continue to age and not be seismic ready. It doesn't, we may have a drop in enrollment this year, but the schools, the facilities themselves are still aging daily. They don't fix themselves. So I think this is one that's emerging that we would have good factual information on, and also just where the growth is and to highlight it. So there was a comment that one year, one of Poye, I believe, was a lottery system. So then if you weren't in the catchment, then you would go elsewhere. And I've even heard that Souk Elementary, well, that's your catchment, then if it's full, you could end up going to Cecino's. But I think families choose to live in neighborhoods because of the proximities to the school. So then to suddenly find out, gee, I'm looking at Souk Elementary, but now I have to bus my child to Cecino's, that doesn't make any sense. And they're running out of room for portables and the like as well. So I think it's the case of just, we're moving on with development of the Sun River lands now, and I think this is all information that it would be good to pitch to the minister on the school matter. Yeah, Councillor Meadows.
Yeah, I'd like us to pursue, I'll get the information from you, but we had that discussion with the health out here and the inability to recruit doctors, and because we lost our rural designation.
Yep.
And was it A or D? I can't remember what it was. There was one of those designations where we get a subsidy from the provincial government, and there's places like Prince George that get them, and we're lumped in with Langford and Colwood because somebody looks at a map and says, well, you don't need them. You've got all these facilities right next door to you. But, a half-hour ride into Langford is when you're got a broken leg or a neck. It's not always the right way. So I would like to see us pursue that. I know we do that with the health minister, but I think we could make a pretty good argument that we would like that designation, and it would help our clinic recruit doctors, because I think it's a 25% subsidy or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't have the information. Staff probably does. But
Yeah,
I think
we
we
have
should
that
pursue
in
it.
the primary health. That's another good one. Okay, so can we maybe postpone this item to the next regular council meeting, just so that we can all just sort of give it some more clear thought, and then we can come back and then decide We can all sort of say, these are the ministries and why, and then we can vote on which ones we want to do. Councillor St. Pierre?
Are we likely to have any materials relating, for example, to what we'd like, briefing notes on the, Minister of Education? Is that likely to come together for that meeting? Because that'd be great. I don't know if there's going to be time or.
Well, I think, I mean, right now, it's the case of putting forward the request. Like, what we would need to do is just put a response back and just to say, here's our request and why it is. And then we'll have time to prepare like speaking notes. Okay. So there's more time to get more detailed into specific notes once we know that the meetings have been granted. So for the first off is just looking to, we want to meet with this cabinet minister for these reasons.
Do we have a limit to how many?
This one may be different. It used to be 3 because of the demand. And then typically there is, in previous years, and I'm saying that all the time now, because we are in driving proximity to the legislature, while we would be given some, it's also for the folks that are traveling from more rural, like more a greater distance, they would be like, I know some that have had like up to 7 meetings, but that's because of the travel involved. Like for us to have that many when we can easily access the legislature, but now that it's all virtual, I can see it being different. And then I'm curious as to what attendance is going to be like this year at UBCM, with it being virtual.
Through your worship, I'll just point out that in the note, in the letter there, it does state that the meetings are likely to be held outside of the actual conference dates.
Okay.
So I think that would free up your own time as well as perhaps allow them to manage the meetings.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
So we don't make any assumptions in terms of how many ministers at this point in time? We just.
No, so I think we, and since it's not limiting, and because they're going to go in a virtual form, and also we've invited some of the ministers to participate in UBCM as well, and it's also a shorter program this year, so that's where I think the others, so I think we can put them forward. We may not be limited. I think we just need to agree, is this the ask? The question when we come back then will not be which ministry, since it looks like there's no limit. The question will be, do we all agree that this is the advocacy piece or these points that we want to make? Because if we don't, then that would look odd. If we're, and I've been there with myself and a number member in a previous meeting where we started arguing about the merits of a project. And I'm like, this is just a total fail right now. And it was the roundabout, right? I'm like, so it was just, we are clearly wasting this minister's time.
We need clear direction. We're going to head with something.
Yeah.
Get our ducks in a row, and we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and where it works really well is then if it is, a few of us then on Teams or Zoom is then it's not one person, it may be, and then we'll turn to so-and-so and so-and-so to each address a point, and it's very solid when that approach comes in. But we don't want to go in with, I'm going to read, and these are our 20 priorities. Like, we have a solid ask. So in terms of Minister of Education, we really need our schools to ask, here are the facts. This is why we need this. Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. That the UBCM meeting request correspondence be postponed to July 27, 2020 regular meeting. Or a committee of the whole if that scheduled one happens. It's like whichever sooner.
The 27th would be sooner. We have the one on the 28th for the official community plan presentation.
Okay, so then the one on the 20th is canceled then?
Yes, because that was scheduled to be the strategic planning workshop, which there's not all of council available,
Okay,
so we don't
just-
have anything planned that
We
day.
don't have anything planned. Okay, just wanted to check. Okay then, all right, so we have this resolution moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. And of course, any questions, let me know. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Great, thank you. Next up, 12.5 is correspondence from Christopher Eubank regarding electric kick scooter. I've seen these buzzing around. And Councillor St. Pierre?
Yeah, I was excited when I saw this because it sounds like the province is interested in doing it, and they may not have had a lot of uptake, maybe because of COVID, don't know why. There was indications in the letter. I went looking on the provincial website. The intake period was well past, but it looks like they may have extended. I'd like to know, first of all, whether or not it's actually extended and whether or not we can still apply, so that'd be a good thing to find out. But if it can be extended, it looks like this fits in with our various priorities, with the Transportation Master Plan, with the Climate Action Committee work plan, and also with the needs of an aging population, and with the fact that we've got a pretty good trail system that just keeps on improving. So I'd like to see, what this is about and get more information. That's basically the limits of it. I'm not sure where to go from here with that, but I would like us to, maybe during the strat planning, with more information from staff to find out whether or not we've actually missed the intake or not. Maybe from Ms. Hooper, whether or not this actually fits in with what they're doing. I don't know.
Okay. For Parks and, maybe Parks and, do you disagree?
Through your worship, just to confirm, would you be looking for staff to bring information to the next strategic information session, with further information on this, and we can do a bit of research?
I think that might be best because it'd be a matter of deciding who wants, puts an effort into this particular area with it actually fits in with their strategic priorities. So that seems like the way to go, but I'm throwing it out to see what other people think.
Okay. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I have a great deal of problem with this one. Those e-scooters or little scooters that I've seen around in some places are a hazard on the roadway. They generally tend to be underpowered. I'd have to get some more information. I don't have a problem with some of them on like the Galloping Goose Trail and things like that. But when my experience with those smaller scooters, whether they're gas or electric, is they tend to be halfway between a bicycle and a car. And I don't know, there's somebody with a small scooter runs around here and he's not going fast enough to be in traffic and he keeps off to the right lane, right side, and you basically have to treat them as a bicycle, yet he's going sort of almost your speed and it's a murder getting around him. And they're dangerous, just dangerous. I don't want to see them on our roads. So I'd have to have some more information exactly what they are, what their power are. In order for them to be acceptable to me, they'd have to be along the lines of a motorcycle, where they command a position on the road similar to a car. None of this halfway stuff. So, right now in the Galloping Goose, that tells me that it's underpowered, and there's no place for them on our roadway. So until I hear any more from what I see from this, I'm not interested personally.
The motorized, what would they be called? Little, are they scooters? No, they're not.
There's the bikes.
There's, we have e-bikes. My dad has one. Like a mobility scooter are not permitted on roadways. And to me, this is like a scooter where you put one foot down and you push, right? Is that, I think for me, it's just.
I don't think those belong on the road.
No, I've seen someone go by with one that is electric, but it's it's like you scoot. It's not like a scooter. Yeah, like that.
Like a skateboard with a.
Yeah, and so,
I just Googled them and they look like a scooter, but
yeah,
with batteries. And
so they pick up.
they belong on the road.
No, and it's the same as what my father has. That is a scooter as well. Is that also called a scooter? One of the, but you actually sit in it and it has a cover and you see is that a scooter? Is mobility scooter is the difference. And I guess, no, they're not. Got it. Okay. So I think it's just understanding, this is the stand-up kick scooter
File
that,
it for information.
okay.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Beddoes is,
I'll make that motion to file it for information. Thank you.
okay, is there a seconder to file for information? Seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Over to Councillor St. Pierre.
Well, I think we should really be considering a bylaw to make sure that none of those stupid bikes get on the roads too, because they get in the way of cars awful. And you know what? They're a lot slower than these scooters. and potentially a lot more dangerous. So really what we should be looking at is eliminating active transportation from our transportation master plan, no? So I would have to say I disagree. Stridently, strongly. I think that what you're looking at here is a possible project to find out more.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is I'm not even interested in finding out because it gets in the way of my car. We've just gone through a transportation master plan that really emphasizes active transportation. We know we need connectivity with trails.
Your microphone isn't on.
We need sidewalks. As far as I can tell here, this is talking about sidewalks as well. It's not necessarily on the roads. It could be trails and sidewalks. But we're closing down the conversation here simply because we might be threatening cars. Bicycles are doing the same thing. This is not necessarily something I can agree with at all. I will not support this.
No, I mean, that's a good point. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I don't think it's threatening cars. I just think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous for the person on the bike, for one thing. I mean, you can't put your head in the sand and think, especially in Sault, where 75% of the people commute out of town, that we're going to eliminate cars. I understand what Councillor St. Pierre is saying, but from what's proposed here, I think that I'd like to wait for some technology to catch up and put a vehicle on the road that can compete with a motorcycle. And if we're going to mix them with cars, cars and bikes don't mix. That's why in a lot of areas you have biking lanes. As soon as you put them on the road, the person on the bike is the one that gets killed. The car gets a dent. But I think they're dangerous, and I still feel that way. But I don't want to shut the door. That's why we say receive it as information. If some more information comes up, then we'll pursue it further. But right now, this is all I'm willing to do.
Okay. Councillor Bateman, please.
Yeah. I would think, this transportation master plan does call for complete streets in the future, like Wadham's Way would be the example of a complete street where there's lots of room for everybody. I agree that Souk is not yet ready. We don't have the complete streets yet, unlike, say, I would see the City of Victoria being a spot for a pilot project for the kick scooter. And also, I guess there is the fundamental question you raised at the outset, which is this pilot project program even open at this point? But I agree, we need to find ways to accommodate, as our transportation plan does have that hierarchy of needs, the pedestrian at the top, the auto at the bottom, and yet at the same time, the truth of it is that we are Motor City here, and we're evolving. I'm sure we have other uses of our time and staff time.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre?
I'd like to say that, first of all, I agree with Councillor Beddoes that it's extremely dangerous for cyclists on our roads. But part of the reason it's dangerous is because we don't have, for example, the complete streets. My sense is that, this type of project recognizes that most of Canada isn't this 75% people are driving, and that what they're looking for is a project to try and figure out how we can actually keep people safe while having different modes of transportation on streets. I don't know what kind of improvements to be looking at or what they're looking to try and find out, but this is stuff we need to find out. If we're actually going to meet our master plans, if we're actually going to move forward and have the connections we want and reduce our emissions and so on and so forth, if we're going to make it into the next century, we have to start this at some point. I would suggest that a pilot project to try and figure out how this could work is a good place to start. That's why it's exciting. It's not because we have all the answers, it's because it's a pilot project to try and find some answers. Of course there are problems, otherwise they wouldn't bother with a pilot project. They just roll out the funding and say, pay for your damn infrastructure and do it. That's why it's a pilot project. I would suggest it's a good one, and that we should probably try and find out more about it.
Okay, so I'm just looking at their website here. So this did come out from last year. And yeah, it just says government is developing the process for creating projects and anticipates further info and inviting community proposals in January 2020. The link here just takes you to the active transportation strategy. There's a motion to, and I'm fine to, I see a lot of kids go around on different things, and just when I was coming in, I saw 4 of them all scooting into the new Tim Hortons on the way, so that was kind of neat. I don't know that we could pilot something like this, but I don't even see anything that, I don't know what pilot they're talking about right now. So it's.
I can answer that a bit.
It says here, the ministry anticipates the approved projects may be implemented as early as summer 2020, and the proposals were accepted until March 6, 2020. So for now, it is just appropriate to receive for information, because this is really late. If they're implementing them in 2020, like it's all, and it closed, so COVID may have disrupted this, but the proposals closed in March. So I think it's the case that as we see the ministry launch another set, then that would be the time to look at whether or not we want to pilot something, but the intake is over. So that's where I'm a bit confused as to what.
The letter seemed to indicate the intake had been extended.
There's nothing on the government website, though, that would suggest that. Councillor Beddoes?
Well, let's let someone else lead this charge. We don't have to lead all the charges. If somebody comes up, say the city of Nelson, because they get lots of electricity, if they decide to put these bikes in their community, we've got something to refer to. Right now, I have so little information that I'm only willing to accept it under these conditions. A year from now, I might change my mind, providing we get more information. But if they've got pilot projects, well, let them go on a pilot project. Maybe Whistler's doing it. Who knows? And see what they come up with. But right now, let's just receive it and get on with things. And a year from now, we may have a pilot project to refer to, and I'm more than willing to look at it then. Right now, no.
Yeah, it's just the timing is off, because even now it does say January 31st, and then local government, March 6, 2020 at 4 p.m. So there's nothing on here. Yeah, to indicate that it's extended. It would be on the site. So let's, yeah. Okay, so I'll call the question. It's not that I'm anti anything. It's just there's nothing available for us to apply to, and to advocate on something that is relatively new in our community to be in a pilot project for technology I don't even understand. It just doesn't fit with me. Though I support active transportation. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I don't know, when I look at these things, it's like a kid's scooter, and he's asking that we allow them on our roadways. Our road system is not designed for this, and most of our people use cars to get around, and I think it would be a disaster to try and introduce something like this onto our roadways in their current condition. We're not there yet.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of receive and file? Opposed? Councillor St. Pierre is opposed. That carries. 12.6, conservation and bears, from correspondence from Ms. Lewis.
Mostly, this has to do with whether or not our conservation officers are actually positioned at this point in time to trap and remove problem bears. There have been concerns from the public, specifically from this particular correspondent, Ms. Ellen Lewis, that she's had loss of livestock, both goats and chickens, and her losses are continuing. Her property is reasonably large and difficult to fence in electrically with, and it'd be a high cost. She wouldn't make it back on chickens, I can tell you that right now, for a long, long while. So there is a need to see whether or not this sort of thing can be addressed. Personally, I've had similar issues that were dealt with appropriately by the conservation officers. I have, however, concerns, and they continue, as to whether or not our sort of ad hoc policy, keep Souk wild, keep BC wild, is appropriate in suburban areas. in terms of allowing people to maintain gardens, allowing people to have fruit trees and so on. I know that certain districts and municipalities have actually refused to have fruit trees or to grow food. They specifically say you will not grow food. I'm under the impression that Sun River, I think if that was mentioned to me, may have, that kind of rule. I'm not sure how we can actually really easily increase our food security, for individuals in our community if they can't safely keep chickens, a fruit tree, and a garden. So I'd like to be looking at this at some point very soon. At this point, I'd like to know what the policy is with the conservation officers, just so we can maybe have more information on that. And I don't know if it would be possible to bring them in to maybe have a presentation to see what they can do and what's within their jurisdiction and how they actually deal with these things, because right now our information is all from one source.
Okay, well, that's fair. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'd like to go a step further on that is, I know in respect to what Ms. Lures had pointed out to me and the picture of the goat head on my email. Sorry. Anyways, what concerns me is the safety of the residents in that area. I know I don't want to just say it's a problem for Ms. Lures, because there's a bear there that's breaking into her chicken coop on a regular basis. And the comment from somebody in the conservation office is, well, you shouldn't grow chickens in the woods. She's in an area, it's in, what do you call it, our approach is anyways, but it's very rural. We're trying to encourage people to grow their own food, and she's at a point where the losses are just too great. I would like to have a letter sent to the conservation officer on this one particular area, and I have a grave concern for the children playing around there. That's the Galloping Goose Trail. It's very rural there. There's a lot of kids playing there, and this bear shows no fear. And it's unfortunate that is now found a food source in a chicken coop. But what's the answer is that people don't have chickens, people don't have fruit trees, and anything that would attract a bear. I like bears, actually. I got one in my area, and I try and not to feed it and encourage it to pass on through. But I think it's gone to a point where one of our residents is having a lot of concerns and not getting her needs met. And I'm concerned for the safety of the people. I would not want to have an email of an injured child because of a bear. And this bear that's causing the problem, unfortunately, has a cub, and that even makes it more dangerous. So there are occasions when they either have to relocate one or put one down. And it's unfortunate, but that's a reality of life. So I would be interested to hear the other councillors if we can draft a letter saying that we would like the Conservation Office to address this problem. Maybe just keep it simple as that. But like I say, I phoned the Conservation Officer and he wouldn't even return my call, and identified who I was and my concern, and maybe it fell through the cracks, I don't know. But it's gone on long enough. I think the time is somebody has to look at the safety of that area. And if anybody's been on the Galloping Goose Trail down there, it's like a super highway sometimes on the weekend with parents and kids and dogs and no cats. I haven't seen cats there yet, but so I think something needs to be done. I think there has to be some direction by council here to the conservation group saying that there's a problem, solve it.
Okay, go to other councillors. Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's no difference. A bear that's found a food source in chickens or goats or whatever it is no different from a bear that's found a food source in people leaving their garbage out. And this bear has obviously become a problem, and I think the Conservation Service should look after it.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And yes, this is clearly the latest in a long series of a fed bear is a dead bear. And it brings, so I agree, we need to, as a council, request Conservation Services to act on this particular bear. But I think we can also use it as an example of a situation with bears and attractants. And I had an interesting series of conversations with one of the Stick in the Mud regulars, Gary Schroyen. He's the wildlife photographer who volunteers with Coexisting with Carnivores and Wildwise Souk. And I think, following up on Councillor St. Pierre's comment, I think we have a committee of the whole in the future that might involve a presentation from Gary, from Conservation Services, Coexisting with Carnivores. Gary, who happens to be in the business of installing electric fencing, sent me some information. UQLIT, just this last month, in early June, received a delegation from WildSafe BC. Now, if you remember when WildWise's Sam Webb was here back in January, she proposed that Souk might want to become a WildSafe BC community and take advantage of some of the funding that comes through and the expertise. So WildSafe made its presentation in UQLIT. Last year, they had to destroy 14 bears because they were breaking into chicken coops left, right, and center. They installed the electric fences, and there were no further issues. I know at Mrs. Luer's property, it's a very complicated property with a lot of different access points and you know, all sorts of problems. But in UQLIT, the staff, first of all, said we don't have time to deal with this, but it should still be dealt with. And WildSafe gets into scenarios where there are cost sharing with landowners to put up electric fencing. And examples of Squamish, District of North Vancouver, and Williams Lake, which have bylaws in their animal control bylaw, clearly stating that coops and pens and beehives as well should have electric fencing. So yeah, I think we'd want to look at a committee of the whole further down the road, perhaps in relation to, I think your, Councillor St. Pierre, you moved, I'm not sure where it stands, the wildlife management. Where do we leave off with that? I can't remember.
I believe I tried to move that forward with the repealing of the firearm bylaw, you know, to look at our wildlife management policy. I think I was informed at that point in time that wildlife was under the purview of the province. I'm not sure at this point, you know, whether or not that addresses our need for a wildlife management policy internally regardless. But I think I would appreciate a committee of the whole to discuss that with information, maybe from a delegation of people who know more about it. I would also like to just add to that one of my concerns, and that's farmers. And I'm concerned that farmers with a pest management, I think it's a pest management permit or whatever it is, potentially have the right to actually shoot these bears or shoot these animals, but may not have the appropriate skills. And that could be dangerous in itself. I do have concerns about, people taking on more. The bear can probably bite off more than they can chew. I'd be worried about that sort of situation happening. So I would like information from the conservation officers in terms of, best practices, what are their policies, how to best work with them to make sure that all these different needs are met. I'm worried about not necessarily knowing how they're supposed to operate and therefore misconstruing what's happening here. So I'd like to get more information from them.
Okay, so Councillor Beddoes, and then I have a few comments.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bateman, for that information, because that may be a longer-term solution. And I fully concur with what you're saying. If we can get somebody from the WildWise, whatever it's called, you said, WildSafe, and to come here and see if there's something that can be worked out, and invite some of the farmers like Mrs. Luers and a few others, and the conservation officer, and see if there is something more we can do. But on the interim, I think we need to deal with this one problem, and that is to get the conservation officer, get on it, solve it, do something, and get going on it. So I'm really encouraged by what you're saying, both Councillor St. Pierre and yourself, because again, I don't want to be killing animals. I really don't, or see them. But our safety of our community right now is this bear, as you said, is killing goats and chickens and stuff like that, it is beyond redemption. So I'm sorry, sometimes it's a necessary evil.
So for myself, you know, the conservation officers are governed, or they're governed by the Crown, not by us. So I don't know that we have authority to tell the conservation officer to do something. I mean, if it was our bylaw enforcement officer and our own bylaws, then I could see that, but this falls into provincial jurisdiction. We have funded Wildwise Souk for a number of years to try to find ways to coexist and to do more education and outreach. And I'm not saying that there's a problem here, there could be, but so you trap the cub and you have one angry bear on hand, and that then does what to the goose or whatever? You have a potential very dangerous situation on hand there. And then what happens next fall, next year? You know, are we going to continue? There's an attractant, obviously. So is this the one and only bear, or they're going to keep coming back until the problem is, you know, mitigated in some way? You mentioned Sun River. I mean, there was always the case there that, you know, think about what you plant, because the deers will come through and eat everything. The deers, the rabbits, the bears, and everything. So it's typically, if you are allowed to have fruit trees, you just need to consider where they are planted, and so that you can actually enjoy your crop before some other creature of sorts eats them all. So there are bears that people video going, you know, climbing over fences and eating the apples and carrying on their way. They've been in that neighborhood forever, and certainly since we first moved into the house, there's been bears walking down our road every year. But it's not a dangerous bear, it's just passing through. And then there was, Wildwise has done significant work to have folks, there's even a recent one on the weekend about managing the attractants. And so I think that's where even the allotment gardens they have an abundance of fruit trees in the heritage orchard that is there. It's fenced in a way, though, that keeps them out. So I've talked to some of the folks that are in there, and the bear goes by, they can't get in. I've heard stories of Souk, though, where all the animals seem to work together. So the bear knocks down the fence, and then the deer, the rabbits, and they all go in one after another, and they just sort of wait together and do that. And that's why now we have the sign on the highway that says, "Welcome to Bear Country." So, I mean, I'd like to get more information on what is the policy and how do they act, and then what. I think that would be the one part. I'm not comfortable directing. I don't even know that we could send a letter, but we don't have any. We can highlight a problem, but if they're working with their policy, then it has to go to the province and not to us, because that is not our policy that is in play. I empathize here, but then next year, are we going to see a letter or from various places now, can you please get rid of this bear and this bear and this bear? Because they're going to keep being attracted to what's on the property. Or what if they do put in a trap and, like I said, the cub is caught and the mother isn't? And the mother gets angry and dangerous, and someone runs out into high or whatever, because it's an angry, upset bear. You're never supposed to get between a mother bear and her cub, because she'll become very erratic. So that's part of the education that I've heard from Wildwise. So then are we somewhat liable because we stepped in and instructed? I don't know that answer.
Maybe I should clarify.
But I just...
Yeah, I don't tend on, we should tell the conservation officer how to do his job. That wasn't the thing.
Okay.
My concern is to bring it to their attention that it is a possible danger to the children in the area. That's it doesn't matter about Mrs. Lures losing her chickens and stuff.
Yeah.
We have a bear that is used to, in that area, eating chickens and sheep and stuff, and it's happened. Now, it's sad. Maybe next year we can get some help for farmers that they can fence their property off with electric fences. But I want to deal with the here and now. I don't want to tell them they don't have to destroy the bear, but they have to deal with the problem. There's a problem right now with a bear roaming the area, killing livestock, and is used to killing livestock, feeding it to her cub, and I think that's a danger to people. And that's my concern. My concern isn't the fact that Miss Lure loses a couple of chickens. Well, I am concerned about that. But like I say, I would not want to get an email that's saying that some child is being hurt because of this bear. And there is a distinct possibility that would happen. So
Yeah,
that's
so-
all I want to draw
Okay.
to their attention, that we're aware of it, and we would like him to handle the situation, however they see fit. I mean, that's up to them. I'm not trying to tell them how to do it. They know more about it than what we do. But it is getting to be a concern. It's a concern for me, for the kids. I
Yeah,
know
and
the
I'm,
area.
I'm fine with that. I just don't want to, like, in here, the ask is that we ask him to set the trap, like, that's, I'm like, I'm not going to ask him to do that because I don't know what, like I said, you trap the mother, not the baby, then what is going to happen? And it's, like, that is not,
Let them
yeah.
do it. Just saying that, at least I do, and I don't know if the other counselors and yourself do, I have a concern right now that there's a bear down there that, to me, is a threat to children. When I have, in my area, I have a bear that comes in there quite often, and I use bear bangers, and I shoot him in the bum and stuff with a rubber bullet. But if they ever attacked my grandchild, I'd blow it away. But, you know, and I like animals. I like them very much, and especially bears. I'm very fond of them. But this has gone one step, and it's up to them. They're the professionals. Let them manage it, but it's a problem. Get on with it, manage it, and
Yeah,
let us know
so
how
we
they made out.
can, okay, so staff is listening, obviously, so they have to receive for info, and they wrote that council requests staff write a letter to the Ministry of Environment requesting a presentation at an upcoming committee of the whole meeting, and make them aware of a problem bear in and around the 5500 block of Souk Road near the heavily used Galloping Goose Trail.
We gotta
So,
split that, don't we?
I think it's the case, well, it can all go to one because we're receiving and there's an action. Unless you want, there's a motivation to sever, but I think it's the only thing requesting a presentation of, like, we would need to say that it's into wildlife management or, you know, because they're going to say, well, what do you want us to present on? We cover this. So it would just have to be, and we could forward this item of correspondence to them. Because there's two sides to this story here. So we're hearing from a resident with her side, and that is alleging that he has said this. There's also that officer's side of events in terms of what he saw and what he did say. And I'm not here to make judgments on either. I only have one side of the story here.
Just a couple of comments. The first is it the Ministry of Environment or the Conservation Office?
Conservation Services.
That I'm
But they would be reporting up to the Ministry of
Okay, I was just curious as
Environment.
to whether or not we want to go directly to the Conservation Office. The other thing I just wanted to comment on is that because of, you know, they're not within our jurisdiction, they're not at our beck and call, we don't pay their salaries. That's why I was interested in having an explanation and clarification on their policy, because I'm reasonably sure they have some discretionary ability, and I'd just like to know better, you know, how we can work with them to actually address these issues. So that's one of the reasons for this presentation. But I'd like to know, you know, what their latitude is, what their policies are, and how they're working on them. And that way we can work more effectively with them when we have these issues.
Yeah, my understanding of the policy, but it's probably best that a conservation officer present it, is that they don't want to just come out to communities to shoot and trap animals. They want to give some education and awareness and have residents do some work to mitigate and to take steps to mitigate the problem so that they're not just coming out trapping and shooting, because the general public wants to see, we want to coexist in a different way. So, you know, together and not do that. So, but I don't, obviously not an author of the policy or really aware of it. So, does this I feel needs to be a bit more, it has to be like Ministry of Environment is fine, but specifically to the BC Conservation Office. You got that? Okay. All right, so here is the resolution. Is this meeting, whoops, council's expectations on this?
Yeah, it hit the two things that I'm happy with. I'd put the problem bearer first, but how you draft a letter, that's up to you guys. You draft letters very well, I hope. So, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, would you like to move it then? Sure. Okay, moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything further? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I just hope that this presentation of the committee of the whole would be the next step towards addressing some of these bigger issues related to attractants. Yeah, so it would be a good information session, but hopefully out of it further steps will emerge.
Well, I hope so, but at the same time, we funded WildWise maybe up to 10?
They're a line item now in the budget for $7,000 a year.
7,000 a year,
Yeah,
and so, and they started receiving grants a few years ago now.
Well, they became a light item for 2019. I believe they received a grant in 2018 from council
Probably a
contingency.
community grant or contingency
Yeah, I
related?
believe, because they came in late. I believe it was
Okay.
right around the time I started, so I'm not 100% clear on it. But I know they received a line item of 7,000 last year and as well for 2020.
Right, so in some ways, we are taking some steps there. You know, in the meantime, you know, we could, you know, recommend that the author of the writer maybe connect with WildWise Souk just to get some information on maybe what she could do for her property. I mean, that's what I don't know if they're doing that right now with COVID or not. They've done excellent work informing and educating members of the community in terms of what they can do, and that's in some cases where problems have moved on or ceased to be a problem in a particular area. So by funding that, that's kind of where we empower community groups to do work, because we can't do all of it.
I think WildWise have a meeting on the 20th, don't they?
They
I'm
might.
trying to find it, because I was going to go to it, and I said I couldn't do it because I was going somewhere.
Is that their workshop series, I think?
Okay, maybe if,
I attended. I don't know whether I'm on it or not. I just go because I'm interested, but.
yeah, so maybe if you can't, Councillor Beddoes, if you find that information, maybe you could just
I'm trying
share
to
it out
find
and
it.
then see if anyone else is available or interested to go.
Maybe it's happened too. Maybe it was last time, but I thought it was, they talked about the 20th, but let me see. Let's go.
Okay.
Meeting February 2nd, no.
Do you mind if I call the question on this while you're
Sure.
looking for that? Okay. All right, I'll call the question, and all those in favor? Opposed is carried unanimously. Okay, that's good. Council verbal reports. Any updates from members of council? Council, or Ms. Machado?
Sorry, not council, but I just received a text from Ms. Hooper, and the meeting's on the 20th.
There, I knew it there. Way to go.
Okay, maybe Ms. Machado, could you ask Ms. Hooper maybe just to circulate that out, just to see if
Yeah,
if
unfortunately.
others, because you're going to be away.
I won't be there. I'll be on
No.
the boat by that time. Would somebody else volunteer to be on that?
I would go to that.
Okay, and
Okay.
yeah, they're very good group, by the way, but.
Okay, if you're able to provide that to all of us, then we can see what we can do. And then that'll be great. Okay. All right, thank you for that. Very relevant update. Other members of council for updates, please. Or members of council for updates. Okay. Councillor Bateman.
Okay, I attended the CRD board meeting on June 24th, and new parks management plans are being developed for East Souk Regional Park, Roche Cove, and Matheson Lake Parks, and that's going to start with public input in the fall. CRD water quality again ranks in among the best in the world category. We're to expect this BC Government South Vancouver Island Transportation Strategy in the relatively near future. And the CRD financial plan was amended on a bunch of fronts, most notably for Souk is the addition of $200,000 for the completion of the Todd Creek trestle on the Goose. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beddoes?
Just sure everybody knows that the homeless camp has its move scheduled for the 20th of July, which they will be hopefully out of Ed McGregor Park into our new, whatever you want to call it. So that's coming up and should be interesting times.
To say the least. Councillor St. Pierre? Okay, just thank you. Thank you for attending that meeting. I was with my father that day. But just a few things that are coming are with primary health. You know that the final improvements and the renovations in the clinic are pretty much complete. Then we have the 2 nurses that will be starting. New nurse practitioner is in the process of relocating from Vancouver. And also there is a new doctor that will be starting as well, so that's exciting. So there was some conversation about, we do very well with physician recruitment. While we have a long wait list and a short, and people that are unattached, when you compare us to other regions, we are actually doing very well on a per capita basis. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the strength at the local clinic, the model that they're doing. But in conversations with the physician, there were some things where in the world of medicine, were not necessarily on the radar. So he was at a convention and went for a run with somebody, and I guess on that run talked to him about how wonderful Souk was, and that piqued the physician's interest in finding a place to relocate to. So that sort of strong word of mouth is what's happening. So there was some dialogue that there are some significant conferences where there is an ability for maybe us as a community to participate in like a trade show, like Choose Souk for these reasons. However, both are not happening this year because of COVID. But it is certainly something to think about going forward. And so in some communities, what they do is if a potential physician comes in, the mayor may take, and a counselor may take the physician on a tour of the community for dinner, that sort of thing. So COVID has changed how that works, but it is something that we may want to consider going forward, because while it's great to have the medical professional, they'll also bring another spouse, like their spouse may also be in the medical field, and then we would benefit from having that additional skill set as well. So there are some interesting possibilities that I said I would be opening to explore. So that's some of the takeaway until we meet again in terms of what we're working on. I also participated with some other mayors on the Canada-BC expert panel on the future of housing supply and affordability. So it was a round table. It was sort of an intimidating group of panelists. It was meant to be in person, but also just talking about the work that we're doing and so forth. So that was just a way to sort of pitch what we were doing in Souk and to provide some feedback with that. There's also been, Minister Robinson was meeting sort of weekly during COVID to 2 weeks, and now it's going on a monthly basis, and they're looking for feedback in the recovery and how local government can contribute to the recovery, the economic recovery in BC, and what that looks like. We talked briefly about the coalition, the homelessness. So I was on CBC radio, it was this morning, it was early, briefing just on how it's going, interviewed by the Times Colonist and the Souk Mirror recently. And then I just feel there was a large abundance of fake news spilling out on social media that was triggering. I was actually very angry at the writers and very disappointed, just given the amount of stress that people are on. Now is not the time to be spreading garbage on top of everything. So I did put together some posts that I think helped clarify that. And of course, it also drew some of the anonymous sources in, challenging me. For example, in my interview with reporter Gibson, we were talking about the parks, and we were talking about a number of different things. And then I had mentioned amenities in park, and that Broom Hill and Ed McGregor are the only two with running water for sanitation purposes. So this writer was challenging me, saying that all of our parks have water and they all have running washrooms. I'm like, really? Like, which ones? Because this is news to me. We have pit toilets in this park. Yes, there's a drinking fountain, but that's really not the place to like wash your hands out of the drinking fountain. And it was shut off during the pandemic. So of course, then all the posts disappear, and they were all anonymous. So I just, it drew some people out, so that are still hiding under an anonymity, but for whatever game of their own, is, I just find that disheartening. Our community doesn't need that rubbish at a time like this. Trying to speak nicely. Island Health is continuing to hold some meetings just to talk about some of the work that they're focusing on. The hospitals are at their old levels of volume. There's new ways of delivering service, though, due to COVID. And they're also taking action to address the discrimination that was found in Saanich Pen Hospital. So that's happening there. And, what else is in here? Mayor's Luncheon featured, not luncheon, it was like over the lunch hour. To clarify, we weren't having lunch together. We were on Zoom eating lunch. But Tourism Victoria and the Victoria Harbour Authority just talked about what tourism is like, and in Greater Victoria, hotel revenue is down 93% compared to 2019. There's going to be no recovery this year at all. There's been no pre-bookings, mass cancellations. Locals are traveling, but they're doing day trips. They're not resulting in overnight stays. Best case scenario, return to normal, maybe end of 2021. And our BC locals traveling market share only makes up roughly 33% of the overall tourism. A big drive comes from the US. But right now we understand why the border's closed. Right? So there's some challenges there. And then Canada Day, we did our motorcade, which was fun actually, I liked it. And the other work I've been doing actually is with the, surprisingly, it's with the United Nations, with their Habitat Division, and it's on raising the voice of small towns and the impact of COVID on small communities. So I gave a bit of some briefing there, and then there'll be some more follow-up work to come with that. So very dynamic panel. It was at 6 in the morning, but that's to accommodate the time differences and just the number of people that were zooming in from different places. It's my second session, was quite fantastic. Women political leaders, global mayors, Asian Mayors Forum. So that was, I learned a lot in that very short time, despite the early hour there. And yeah, so it's always just busy. And then even for your interest, we were at Local Government Leadership Academy this year, actually, before the world changed. And there will be work to doing another session, but it will be virtual, because trying to plan something in person with a virtual backup means that everyone is planning 2 events. Really. You have to just decide on one. And we know that we can't have any groups meeting of over 50, and conferences are not allowed, so everything is taking a virtual form. So interesting pieces out of that. And then through FCM, we did a check-in just with our international work, because all the programming, including the one that I'm on, everything's been canceled or suspended. So how are our partners in other places managing and coping? Canada, through the FCM, on behalf of local governments, has supported providing some guidance on sanitation and hygiene in places like Haiti and Jordan, in Africa and others, just to help sort of bend that curve that they're also facing there as well. And then there's advocacy to extend the programming beyond the approved years. But everyone has been pulled out and brought home, obviously, so it's really hard to understand what's on the ground. So it's quite dire, actually, just what folks have the access to. And So yeah, there'll likely be more on that to come. So yeah, that's kind of been it in addition to everything else, and so it goes. Any questions? No, it's always busy, but that's okay. I'm taking some time off in August. Will be the first time since, I don't know, January, last August, I guess, because there's always something, but I mean, I do get I got a bit of a break when I was in Cambodia because I had 10-hour airport delay, right? So yeah, it's like 5 movies. How many can I watch on this flight?
I'll think of you when I'm on the houseboat.
I know, I'll be thinking of you when I'm not on a houseboat. Yeah, it's all good. So thank you very much. I've been a bit snappy and it's just a bit of a strain and stress, but I'm getting over it. Capital Regional Board, thank you for going. I attended the last one, and committee work will be starting to resume again, and was in the board in person, which was nice. Yes, Councillor.
Well, you mentioned stress. So the
Yes.
Souk Multi-Belief Initiative, of which I'm a part, we're organizing a series of nights in the park just over here, starting next Tuesday night. The series is called Building Resilience in Times of Stress. So this is, some of our local, Rick Eby and Andy Schell of the Toronto City Mission, Mark Ziegler, and Baha'i Don Brown will be offering up solutions and ways to manage. Yeah. You're welcome.
Healthy ways to manage.
Oh, healthy.
Maybe send me the details and I'll,
We'll all head to the pub after.
okay, so I think that's it. So on that note, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Beto, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Have an awesome, well-deserved holiday on your boat. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. So, well, I'll live vicariously through your trip. And
No, I'll tell you, I mean,